Alright, what's up you guys? I've been getting asked this question a ton. Is New World worth your money? And more importantly, is it worth your time? That is the question and is why I'm assuming most of you clicked on this video. Since the game has been out for a little over a week, I decided to create a review based on my experience playing the game so far, as well as my time playing Lost Ark, Final Fantasy, and a few other MMOs to be named this year. I'll be breaking down the PvP, the leveling experience, overall game stability, bugs, the housing system, and pretty much anything else you can think of. Now, before we get into this video, I cannot stress this enough. This is only my opinion. Don't take this video as the absolute truth of the game. Not everyone views the game in the same light, and I don't want to mislead anyone before making the decision to purchase the game. I'll be using a 10-point scoring system, similar to what you may have seen in some of the infamous One Bite Pizza reviews by Dave Portnoy, and I'll most likely follow up this video with a separate review based on the war feature, but I'll touch on that a bit later in the video. Let's get started. The leveling system. This for me is probably one of the weaker parts of the game. There are a variety of ways to earn experience in New World, however, one of the best ways to earn experience outside of some of the crazy outdoor dungeon farms is going to be your various town board mission quests, your faction quests, and the main story quests. And although I really do appreciate the ability to earn experience through crafting and gathering, the questing experience in New World is really repetitive. Nearly every quest consists of you going out, killing X amount of pirates, collecting X amount of crates, and I know this may seem like your typical MMO quest, but in New World, it just feels a bit different. And most likely this is due to the lack of mob diversity, and more importantly, some of the quests being the exact same. You head to the same area to complete the same quest when you're locked behind your MSQ. And if you play the game, you know what I mean. Now, they have made some improvements to this system, especially when compared to their initial early access phase, but the quests are still awfully similar, and I would have liked to have seen a bit more diversity. Now, again, I know for some people, leveling isn't the most important thing in an MMO, but the leveling does seem to be a big part of New World, as it does take quite a while. I feel as if the leveling is best enjoyed when done in smaller segments, as well as when you're mixing in some of your PvP faction missions and gathering. When I tried to power through the game, and just do the quest over and over and over again to get as much experience as possible, I started to burn out a little bit. Let's quickly talk about the combat. The combat can be hit or miss for some people. At first, I thought it felt quite shallow, and although it's not the most complex system out there, it started to feel alright after I'd progressed down a weapon tree. When fighting mobs out in the world, the combat feels alright, but when heading into any type of large-scale PvE content like dungeons for example, the body blocking really starts to become annoying. And I can understand the purpose of body blocking in PvP content, however in PvE content like a dungeon for example, it becomes somewhat of a shit show of everyone trying to position and get a hit in. And I can't imagine any type of large-scale PvE content with the current system like raids for example. Not to mention when fighting a larger boss, your rotation can start to feel a bit stale depending on your weapon. As many of you know, PvE content was something they decided to add later into the game's development, and when it comes to the current combat system, I think the game really needs a lot of work. The camera angles can be quite awful when fighting in close quarters, and it just almost feels like a spam fest of auto attacks when you can't see your character. However, PvP is a different story for me. If you're looking for the most complex combat that reminds you of World of Warcraft or BDO, you're going to be sadly disappointed. But I actually had a pretty good time playing with my friends and jumping people in the forest when doing our PvP missions. I don't think the combat is pretty to look at, but when playing, it feels alright. But we'll talk more about PvP later on in this video. Alright, now on to the mob AI. And I know at this point in the video, it does sound like I'm kind of ragging on New World, but I do want to discuss some of the things I would like to see them improve in a future update. The mob AI in New World may be some of the worst mob AI I've experienced in quite some time, and I know this is rather harsh, and many MMOs are not known to have great mob AI, but there's something about the mobs in New World that is just dysfunctional. The mobs will spawn on top of you, then attack you as you're gathering something, and then all of a sudden decide to run away, only to return a few seconds later. Mobs will bug out and begin to take strange routes in order to attack you, and I've found the retreating mechanic on most mobs to just feel strange. I know they've tried to combat this by putting a retreating tag on mobs as they de-aggro, but it still doesn't feel right. I hope this is something they can improve on over time. Is it game breaking? No, but it is very noticeable and a complaint I had over a year ago during the early access test. Okay, on to some positives. Let's talk about the running. If you've been on Twitch, I'm sure you've heard people complain about the running. People will say things like, every time I watch someone play this game, the only thing I see is running. And this is very true. Some of the quests are spread so far apart and you will have to travel across the zone just for a tiny bit of experience. But it's what you do during that run that helps you progress your character. Cutting down some trees to level up your logging, gathering random hemp plants, mining ore, etc. These are the ways you progress your character and are necessary for you to get the most out of your experience. A lot of people have been requesting mounts in the game, but the running is how Amazon artificially inflates the size of the world, and I don't really mean that in a negative way. It creates this feeling of a world that is alive, and I think mounts are something they should add as the game grows, but not something just yet. It's also important to note that there is a fast travel system in the game, and I personally believe it gets the job done. As weird as it sounds, the running is just something you get used to, but I know it may turn some people off. For me, I just watched an episode of Squid Game as I ran to turn in my next quest. Moving on to the PvP, since I know for a lot of people that is the highlight of the game. If you're into world PvP, I think many of you will enjoy New World. However, I'm not sure many of you will enjoy going in solo. I did find myself having a good time doing my PvP mission quest solo, but like all world PvP games, strength is in numbers. If you can grab a friend or a group of friends, there's definitely some fun to be had. Battling for various resources of the map, getting revenge on the dude that jumped you when you were trying to complete a quest, or fighting over a point really brought me back to my early days playing Vanilla WoW as a kid. To be honest, I used to talk a lot of crap about world PvP. I always felt as if it was just a giant Zugfest, and honestly, in a lot of ways it still is. But something about the world in New World just felt good for PvP. So many times that I catch myself running for my life. You won't find the most complex PvP combat in New World, but you can definitely find some fun. Now there are other modes of PvP, one of them being known as the War Mode feature. This is essentially when you declare war on a settlement in order to gain control. However, in order to partake in these, you will need to be invited. Additionally, as a war is going on, you're essentially locked out of the zone in an invisible wall way. This was honestly a bit annoying as I was just trying to complete a quest, but I can understand why they decided to do that. I do think the system needs some tuning as it can feel a bit exclusive. I tried to get into several wars, but because I played on a random server, I simply wasn't invited. There is also a battleground mode that is available at level 60, and I will probably give a separate review on both the war mode feature and the battleground feature in a future video. On to the visuals. Now this is something for me that completely changed after a day of playing the game. When I first got into the game, I was a bit turned off from how the game looked overall. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I just didn't vibe with how the game looked. But after about a day I logged into the game, I realized just how good the game can look during certain times of the day. I started to appreciate how my character looked while running through the world, and everything just kind of clicked. Now this is definitely going to vary person to person. I'm not the biggest fan of the armor art style, and I do think some of the sunshaft effects are a bit overdone. However, I do find the visuals to be something that's a plus for me. To kind of summarize it, it was really nice playing a game that didn't look like Play-Doh or a game that's been out for 15 years. Alright, the gathering and the crafting are undoubtedly the best feature of New World, and this is coming from someone who doesn't have a lot of interest in that type of stuff. To be honest, I can't imagine the large travel distances without all of the gathering opportunities. Everything you gather, skin, and create has a purpose, from consumables to heal you during battle, to weapons and armor, and even furniture that you can place in your house one day. Early on, I became the ultimate hemp farmer and began seeing other plants that required significantly higher levels of experience. For me, I saw this as an early motivation to progress through the system, although I do believe some of the items that you can gather are too spread out in terms of the experience required. So I know this isn't going to be something that's interesting for everyone, but I think the system is so well done that almost anyone can find enjoyment in it. Alright, I couldn't make this video without buying my own house. My buddy Yasso and I had a plan to get our own home, but after arguing with the little Goblino himself, I finally convinced him to give me the gold to purchase my own house. However, he had one stipulation.
Get the fuck out of here.
No. How about this? We each get a house. How about that?
Give me 500, I buy this house.
We each get a house in the same place.
That's fine, give me 500 gold.
Oh my god, this fucking guy. This guy's fucking...
What do you mean we each get a house? I'm asking you for 500 gold to buy it. I ran over there to get you over here to show you this.
Over, I can't open the goddamn trade raise.
I had to wail out and purchase the housing set from the cash shop because that's what he planned to do with his own house. So he juiced up my house like an episode of MTV's Pimp My Ride, and the housing system is pretty cool. It essentially offers greater storage, a second recall point, as well as various buffs through their trophy system. There is also a progression system within the housing plan. The more you add or build for your house, the more points you earn within the housing system. Several people can own the same house, but the person who holds the most points on that lot will have their decorations displayed to everyone within the town. There is one caveat though, the actual UI when trying to set up your house feels rather rushed. I got pretty frustrated when trying to navigate the UI, and depending on the size of your house, your options are rather limited. Finally, I think it would be somewhat disingenuous to not discuss some of the bugs, serviceability issues, as well as the login queue times. The first few days, I found several bugs in the game that were more humorous than anything, small glitches in the game where the world would disappear in front of my eyes, quest givers that would bug in funny camera angles, and I also noticed when trying to gather footage, a random giant shark glitch monster would spawn from the ground for a moment. but most of that stuff was rather small and it seemed to have been cleared up over the past couple of days. I didn't notice any real server lag, and the game overall felt significantly better than it did during the open beta. I know many people experienced large server queue times depending on the server they chose, and in my experience, I ended up playing on a random West server with a high population and only hit one queue time with a position of around 300. However, just because that was something that I didn't really experience doesn't mean it wasn't an issue for other people. It does seem that most of these things have been cleared up by now, and if I'm being honest, all of these issues was something I expected for a new MMO, especially one that garnered so much attention at launch. The last thing I did want to mention though was the missing swimming animation in the game that clearly exists. And although this is not a bug, I'm not sure why it's an issue in the first place. It's weird because sometimes you're even asked to collect various crops or crates that are located within water, and it feels awkward that you can even drown while doing so. I'm sure this is a feature they will add at some point, but I can't understand why it's been neglected for so long. Perhaps some sailing content can be added later on in the game's life cycle, and I think that would be a huge feature that would pair really well with the ideology of the game. Almost like some Sea of Thieves type content, but that is probably something for a separate video. Okay, that was a lot of information really fast, but what are my final thoughts on the game? What would I score the game for someone like myself? With everything considered, I did have a difficult time finding the exact spot to place New World, at least in its current state. But after several days of thought, I decided to rate the game a 7.1. For me, it passes. To some of you that may seem rather low, but I feel like the current PvE content is awfully unprepared. And most of you know that I'm not even a PvE guy, but there is a reason they decided to add PvE content into the game. The average player is someone that desires some type of PvE content. It is the end game for most people. Certain aspects of the game still need a lot of work, but I think for a brand new MMO, it does just fine. And to those of you that think my score is rather high, I think the game does a lot of things right. It has the foundation to improve, and ultimately the game is only $40 with no subscription fee. I paid $60 for single player games that are significantly worse in value. For what the game is trying to accomplish, I think it's a good start, but they still have a lot of work to do, and I don't just mean releasing content. That is expected. I mean solving many of the issues discussed in this video. So should you buy the game? That's going to depend on what you enjoy, what I discussed in the video, and your finances. If $40 is a lot of money for you, then maybe hold out on this one. But for me, gaming is a hobby, an inexpensive one at that. And I think the game was definitely worth $40, especially with the ability to revisit the game after a future update. In its current state, New World is a game that I will hop on every now and then, and with its current payment structure, I almost feel incentivized to do so. I will do another video breaking down some of the new content as it releases, and I really do want to review the War Mode feature as I know it's something that the game is based off of. In any case, I hope I give a fair review based on my experience so far, and as always, this is just my opinion. But I hope this video has helped some of you in making your own decision. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you like review videos like this, I'm planning to do one for Guild Wars 2 as well as Lost Ark, so if that sounds interesting to you, consider subscribing so I can stop lying to my mom about my sub numbers. It's kind of embarrassing. I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.